Burkina Faso, a land of resilience, beauty, and conflict. A nation caught in the crosshairs of war, terror, and political turmoil. For years, the people cried for peace, but were answered with silence, bullets, and broken promises. And then, in the heart of the chaos, a new figure emerged. Not a seasoned politician, not a king, but a soldier. At just 34 years old, Captain Ibrahim Traoré led a coup that would shake the foundations of power and become the youngest head of state in Africa. Loved by many, feared by others, this is the story of a man and a nation fighting to survive and redefine its destiny. Long before the title of president, before the camouflage and the commands, he was just Ibrahim. Born on March 14, 1988, in a small village called Kera, in the Bondakui department of western Burkina Faso. Like many in the region, his early years were shaped by simplicity and struggle. But in the dust of rural life, he found something else: discipline, ambition, and a dream that stretched beyond the village. He left his home to pursue higher education in Ouagadougou, where he studied geology, an unusual path for someone who would later carry a rifle and command troops. Friends and classmates described him as quiet, focused, intensely serious. A young man more interested in solving problems than making noise. But Burkina Faso was changing. The threat of extremist violence was growing across West Africa. Communities were under attack, and the military was stretched thin. In 2009, just a year after completing his studies, Ibrahim made a decision that would alter his course, and eventually his country's. He joined the army. For Traoré, the battlefield became a new classroom. The stakes were higher, the lessons harsher, but he learned quickly, and soon, the quiet geology student from Kera would become a voice among the ranks, one that could no longer be ignored. The deserts of the Sahel are unforgiving: heat, sand, fear, and enemies who strike from the shadows. Ibrahim Traoré didn't join the military for prestige. He joined at a time when the country's survival depended on those willing to fight. He was deployed in some of the harshest regions, including operations in Mali during the multinational efforts to suppress extremist groups like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. In these front lines, he saw what few politicians ever did: the fear in villagers' eyes, the fatigue of his comrades, the chaos of a nation at war, with too few resources and too little support. Traoré became a quiet dissenter within the ranks, openly criticizing military leadership for neglecting soldiers and failing the people. But he didn't just complain, he led. By 2020, he had risen to the rank of captain, a recognition of not only skill and bravery but moral authority. Among junior officers and young soldiers, he earned a reputation as someone who listened, who cared, who acted. It wasn't ambition that set him apart. It was conviction. A belief that if leadership wouldn't change from above, then maybe, just maybe, it could change from within. By 2022, Burkina Faso was unraveling. A nation under siege. Terrorist attacks surged. Nearly half the country was outside government control. The people cried for leadership, but the government remained distant. In January, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba had seized power in a coup, promising stability, promising security. But those promises dissolved quickly, and hope began to rot into frustration. Attacks grew deadlier. Villages were abandoned. Soldiers died hungry, outgunned, and forgotten. And in the ranks of the army, whispers turned to resolve. On September 30th, 2022, the ground shook in Ouagadougou. Armored vehicles rolled in. The presidential palace was surrounded. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, just 34 years old, led a second coup, removing Damiba from power. The reason? Damiba had failed to secure the country, failed the people, failed the soldiers. We are not here for power. We are here to fight for our land. In that moment, the continent took notice. A new face, a new fire. Traoré became Africa's youngest head of state, and Burkina Faso's newest hope. While the streets of Ouagadougou erupted in celebration, the world watched in silence, in doubt, and in fear. Who was this young man with a soldier's stare and a revolutionary heart? And what would come next? Taking power is one thing. Keeping it and transforming it into change is something else entirely. From day one, Ibrahim Traoré promised to break with the old system. No more empty speeches. No more foreign dependency. His focus, security, sovereignty, survival. He declared a bold new strategy: general mobilization. Every citizen, not just soldiers, was called to defend the homeland. Young men and women registered by the thousands. The message was clear. This was not just a war against terror. It was a war for identity, for control, for freedom. But Traoré's vision extended beyond the battlefield. He turned his sights to the nation's wealth, especially its gold mines. For decades, foreign corporations reaped the profits, while Burkina Faso remained one of the poorest nations in the world. Under Traoré's rule, the government began reclaiming control over mining zones, cracking down on corruption and smuggling. In the cities, skepticism lingered. But in the countryside, where the fighting was fiercest, Traoré was seen as a liberator. To many of Burkina Faso's youth, he symbolized defiance. A man not afraid to challenge elites. A soldier who spoke the language of the people. Lofty goals, in a land riddled with ghosts of failed promises. But for once, many believed, maybe this time, things would be different. For decades, France was Burkina Faso's closest military partner. Their troops trained local forces. Their bases dotted the land. But under Ibrahim Traoré, the era of French dominance came to a sharp end. In early 2023, Traoré ordered French troops out of the country and terminated all military agreements. His message? Burkina Faso will fight its own battles. We no longer want foreign boots on our soil. With France out, new players moved in. Russia and Turkey, eager for influence, welcomed Traoré's shift. Weapons deals, economic talks, and diplomatic visits soon followed. The Russian embassy in Ouagadougou was reopened, and behind the scenes, reports surfaced of the Wagner Group, a controversial private military company, establishing a presence. Burkina Faso joined a growing list of African nations pivoting east, challenging Western influence in the region. But the shift wasn't without consequence. Traoré's defiant stance sparked tensions with ECOWAS, the West African bloc, already strained by coups in Mali, Niger, and Guinea. Sanctions were debated, diplomatic pressure mounted. But Traoré stood firm, claiming Burkina Faso's sovereignty could not be negotiated. In the new global chessboard of power, the young captain was no pawn. He was moving kings. Power doesn't just come with victory, it comes with sacrifice and consequence. Under Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso's security situation worsened. The country was trapped in a war against insurgents, and the result was catastrophic. Hundreds of thousands of people displaced, villages decimated, lives torn apart. The very citizens who once cheered him on now faced the hardest of realities: insecurity at every corner. And then came the Solenzo massacre, a tragedy that would haunt Traoré's reign. In January 2023, reports emerged of brutal killings in the western region, attributed to forces under government control, though many argue it was chaos in the war against terrorists. Human rights organizations accuse the military of atrocities. Amnesty International, the UN, and local activists cried out for justice. But for some, the allegations fell on deaf ears. For others, it was a harsh reminder. In the fight for sovereignty, what is lost along the way? Amidst this violence came another storm: accusations of authoritarianism. Critics began to paint Traoré as a man whose promise of a new order was slowly transforming into an oppressive regime. Independent press silenced. Dissent crushed. Freedom of speech restricted. For many, this was the price of stability. But for others, it was an unsettling shift toward dictatorship. And then, in April 2025, an assassination attempt on Traoré's life shocked the nation. The plot was foiled, but suspicions ran high. Could the Ivory Coast be behind it? The Ivory Coast, once a key ally in West Africa, had become a key suspect. Traoré and his government accused them of orchestrating the plot, believing it was a response to his growing ties with Russia and his defiance of ECOWAS. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. Burkina Faso's road ahead was no longer just about fighting terrorists. It was about survival, against both internal and external forces. In a world of uncertainty, Ibrahim Traoré has become a symbol of resistance, a symbol of change. For many of Burkina Faso's youth, and for Pan-Africanists across the continent, he represents hope. The hope of a leader who dares to challenge the status quo. The hope of a nation fighting for its independence on its own terms. He is a hero to those who see him as the anti-colonial fighter. A man who pushes back against the forces that have kept Africa in the shadow of foreign influence. To them, his defiance against France and the West is the mark of a true leader. But for others, the story is far different. Human rights organizations, such as Amnesty International and the United Nations, have accused Traoré's regime of perpetuating violence, suppressing dissent, and silencing the press. Insecurity, violence, and allegations of military abuse have left a scar on his leadership. As his rule continues, the question remains: is Ibrahim Traoré a man of destiny or an emerging autocrat? Some see him as the protector of a broken nation. Others as the architect of its downfall. As his legacy unfolds, the world watches, and the future of Burkina Faso hangs in the balance. The future of Burkina Faso remains uncertain. Under Ibrahim Traoré, the country is caught between two worlds, a world torn apart by insurgents and instability, and a world that dreams of peace and prosperity. Will elections ever take place in Burkina Faso? Will the people be given the opportunity to choose their future, free from the shadow of violence? Can this young leader, with his bold promises and controversial methods, steer the country toward lasting peace? Or will Burkina Faso continue to fall deeper into conflict, stuck in a cycle of military rule and instability? For some, Ibrahim Traoré is a liberator. For others, he is a symbol of oppression. As the world watches, only time will tell. But one thing is certain: Burkina Faso's journey is far from over. So we leave you with this question: is Ibrahim Traoré leading Burkina Faso toward liberation, or deeper into conflict?